Welcome to Unhinged Addiction Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm your host. I go by the Mr. Impulsive on a lot of my social media out there. This episode is how I personally got sober. This is something I haven't shared a whole lot about. I'm really big into there's no right or wrong way of getting sober. I think that kind of made it where I was always hesitant to share some of the ways that and how I got sober because it's not a beautiful story. It's not what I've heard from a lot of people, I guess you could say. So this is my how I got sober experience and why I got sober. We're going back to July of 2017. So that month, I remember I was at the head of my addiction. I was snorting 8 balls of coke a day. We're talking at least 4 grams of coke a day. I was drinking 2 fifths of vodka easily in a day. Sometimes even 3. And you have to remember, I'm drinking this all day long, sipping on some of it. Some of it I'm throwing up, whatever. So I even remember at the 4th of July, my ex-wife Amber and I were downtown Huntington Beach and we were eating at a really nice restaurant. And I was like, man, is this all going to crash? I know it's going to crash. At this time, I'm having an affair with her cousin, Brittany. I'm having an affair with the receptionist at work. Her name was Casey. I'm having affairs with, some of her other friends, some friends that I know. I'm sleeping with everybody but my ex. I'm using drugs with other people. I'm not coming home. I hated my life. I literally hated my life. And I remember sitting there, looking at her just going, I don't know what to expect even for the next month. I hated every moment of it. I ended up getting fired from my job at Dennis Dillon RV. I was general manager there. I was making easy $50,000 in a month. I was making really good money. I always made good money. Even after I got sober, I was a sales manager for a while, and I still made good money. But I hated it, my life, and it was all about sex, drugs, and that was it. Those were the only things that mattered to me. And I would lie to people, I would cheat, I would finagle, whatever I could to protect my addiction. My addiction was everything to me. It was my escape from life. It was my escape from reality. And I got fired. And this is a couple days before I got sober, like a week before I got sober roughly, I ended up getting fired. And I knew I got fired. I got fired because I was turned in at work for fucking the receptionist. People knew that I was. I got turned in for drinking and being high all the time. And they finally kind of had enough. Some of the other managers ended up reporting me, which was funny because they were the managers that were like, dude, we got your back, all this. They wanted to see videos and all this stuff. And I'd showed them videos and they're like, oh yeah, they're thinking it's the coolest thing ever. And they're the ones that were out there ratting me out, but whatever. I'm actually very grateful for it in the end. So I ended up getting fired. I'm lying to my ex-wife. I told her I got fired, they go in a different direction is what they tell you. And I just told them I was getting into it with one of the other managers. And I was freaking out inside when I got fired because I knew eventually this would all come to a head. That night she came home and she was just flipping out on me. She was upset because she just so many rumors about me having sex with other people. That was a biggie. that was a big problem. And so I ended up actually landing another job at Family RV, and I went in for the interview and I was drunk. I drank a fifth before I went on that interview and I ended up getting the job. And I got the job. Next thing I know, 2 days later, she comes home. I couldn't start for about a week. She comes home and she's just flipping out. My ex-wife is losing her shit. And she's hitting me. I was in the middle of a drunken nap and she's like, you've been fucking cheating on me, calling me out on all this shit. And I lied. I lied my way through it all. And I didn't know how to come up with anything else other than just sit and lie. And I was going back out to my truck. I was snorting lines of coke while we're in the middle of this fight. She's going fucking sideways, punching me, throwing shit at me. And I'm just lying through my fucking teeth. And I am so drunk. And I had alcohol in my car. And Surprisingly, she didn't go down to my truck to open it up, because if she would have got all the confirmation she needed that I was cheating on her. I had like all sorts of like ball gags and stuff like that in my fucking truck from, like, I'd get hotel rooms with some of these girls and we would just go at it for hours. And like I took all the evidence I could of me cheating and kind of got it into the trash, and I was just drinking. And finally we just had this massive blow up and she's like, fuck it, I'm going to bed. And she goes to bed, and I remember just lying there and I'm like, fuck, man, like, I hate my life. Like, this is not the life that I wanted. I am 36 years old. I'm almost going to be 37. This is fucking horrible. This is not what I wanted to do. And so next thing you know, I'm lying in bed and it just starts to rot in my brain. I'm like, how did I get to this point again? How is it that like every 4 years, this is what happens? I'd get an amazing job and I'd get fired from it. I would lose a relationship that was, meaningful. I would lose everything, and then I would build it all back up. And I'm like, fuck, man. Like, the only thing that's been a constant that had never really changed was alcohol and cocaine. And I'm like, fuck it. I need to get sober. Like, I need to change this. If I don't change this, it's just gonna get worse. Like, I don't know what to expect. Like, I couldn't vision a future more than a month away, more than like a week away. And that's the saddest thing ever, is when you are in life and you can't picture life outside of a week. It's a really lonely place to be. Like, you have no goals really or dreams. You don't know what to expect. Like, life is, that's it. So I knew I had to do something. I start sobbing in bed. I'm like, fuck, I'm drunk, I'm crying, I'm looking at my ex-wife and I'm like, why am I even here with you? Like, I just did not like anything. And I end up passing out finally. And when I wake up, she is gone. And I was like, I have to make a decision. I have to do something different. I'm going to get sober. I have to get sober. And I'm going to tell everybody that I'm an addict. I got to come clean. And like, there's a big part of me that didn't want to get sober. I was like, man, maybe if I do this for like 6 months, because I've been trying to get sober since I was 23 years old. Like, maybe if I do this for like 6 months, I give it everything I got for 6 months, really clean up my life. Maybe I can control it differently. Maybe I'll just relapse, whatever. Like, this will at least help me get my life back together. So I start telling everyone. I call her up. I let her know, hey, I need to like be honest with you. I'm an alcoholic. I didn't tell anyone I was a cocaine addict. I didn't tell anyone, at the time, like I'm pretty much a sex addict because I need that dopamine too. I need that excitement. But it was okay for me to say I was an alcoholic because it was like, it was okay to talk about. Like, it was okay to be that. Like, socially, it's okay to be a alcoholic, and it's strong for you to come forward and admit that you're an alcoholic, and people are proud of you for admitting that you're an alcoholic. And so I started just telling everybody I was an alcoholic, and I said I didn't know what to do. Like, I really didn't know what to do. I knew I needed to get sober. I didn't know what to do. She's like, we'll talk to my grandpa. He's a recovering alcoholic. And I knew, he wasn't a recovering alcoholic, but he had friends that were recovering alcoholics. And so I got in touch. I actually talked to my ex-wife's grandpa. He got me in touch with some people that were sober. And I just kept telling everybody, I'm an alcoholic. I'm drinking a lot. And no one told me about like DTs or anything of that sort. No one told me anything. All they just kept saying is, go to AA. You need to start finding a meeting. You need to go to a meeting. And I started Googling meetings and stuff around me. I found I was in Huntington Beach. I lived off of Yorktown in Maine, and right down the road onto Beach Boulevard, there was actually a meeting. And I remember seeing them there. Like, there's a Taco Bell, and that's one of the things I used to do when I was drunk as fuck. I would go to the Taco Bell and order like $50-$60 worth of food, and I'd always see the people outside the AA meetings and smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. And I was like, fucking losers. Little did I know, like, I'd be there soon, and that's actually the best place you can be. Like, I was the loser. I was just a piece of shit. I start telling everybody that. I get in touch with people, and they're like, oh, you need to get a sponsor. And everybody's very helpful, I will say. I mean, called up my parents, and they heard this story before. My parents knew that there's probably a drinking problem. I've always had a drinking problem. And so it wasn't like the first time I've ever called them up and said, hey, I'm going to get sober. So it's like, okay, cool. Eric's going to do this again. Good job, And I expected kind of the world to bend to me a little bit. because here I am, I'm getting sober. I expect like the hoorah and the kudos. And poor me, that was like my biggest thing that took me a long time in sobriety, even after years after being sober, to get rid of, was like that victim mentality and the self-sabotaging, which was very trauma based. Because I wanted to be the victim. It was never my fault, you know. It was like, oh, poor me. You don't understand what I've been through. And at this time, I lost my wife to suicide in 2015, and I knew that it fucked me up. I didn't know how it fucked me up, and so I was telling people that, you know, I know that a lot of it had to do with the suicide, and I had a new job already at the time now lined up at Family RV, and I'm like, you know, I can do this. And so I was very, very grateful. I did not start that job while I was going through like the first few days of mad withdrawals. I was sweating my ass off. I could not stop sweating. I'd wake up from sleeping and I'd be in a puddle of sweat. And I have to change the sheets and wash the sheets, and it just reeked. And man, I could not shit. I was so constipated. So cocaine has laxatives and stuff usually cut into it, and so I never had problems going to the bathroom. Well, all of a sudden now I'm having problems going to the bathroom. I'm not drinking the water that I should. I should have been taking magnesium and stuff like that, and I wasn't. My body just fucking ached, and I was just exhausted. Smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, man. Marlboro 100. What were they? Marlboro 100s. They were. I want to say I was smoking menthol by that time, or their lights or whatever. I would chain smoking. I'm on the phone nonstop with people though. Just needed people to talk to. I'd be on the phone with my mom for like an hour. I'd be on the phone with my dad for an hour. My dad was starting to get ready to retire, and I knew he was really kind of struggling with it. And that was like just my big focus. All of a sudden was like, okay. And I went to my first AA meeting, and I hated it and didn't talk to anybody. I went to my first AA meeting. I sat in the back, like I introduced myself, Eric, alcoholic. Put my dollar in the thing and just kind of listened to people. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess this is kind of what it's about. Went to another meeting. I didn't do 90 meetings in 90 days when I first got sober. I was doing like 2-3 meetings a week, and I just kind of started muddling myself through it, like not sure what to do. I had really good willpower. That was one thing I had going for me, was really good willpower, because I knew I needed to change. I knew I'd hit that point where I finally knew I needed to change and something needed to change. So I gave it everything I got, and I was able to quit cold turkey. But man, the withdrawal sucked, dude. I wasn't eating. I was losing massive weight. So I got really, really heavy as an addict. Even though I was doing cocaine, I would binge eat hardcore, and I was binge eating just mad amount of calories. I'm not doing any kind of physical activity, so I have no calorie deficit going. I'm not losing weight. I was gaining weight. I got up to about 315 pounds. I have stretch marks on my stomach because I got so big. And I started all of a sudden just not doing anything new. I started walking. That was one thing I did start. I had a dog. His name was Solomon. And my ex-wife Amber has him now. That was part of me not getting alimony and all that. But I would take him for a walk in the morning, a walk in the evening, and we started walking for like 2 miles a day. That was the one thing that like was my physical activity all of a sudden. I would take him out. We were in a condo, so I had to take him out to go to the bathroom and stuff, and I would take him on walks. And I'm not working because I hadn't started my new job yet. And so I started these walks, and it kind of felt good to get the body movement going. But I was seriously, in the first 3 weeks of my sobriety, 4 weeks of my sobriety, I am losing like 3-4 pounds a week. Like I've just started dropping weight. It is amazing how much Coke bloat you have, how much the bloat of the alcohol. Just after a couple days, you've lost like 10 pounds. Like in the very beginning, I was like shedding. You could stare at me, watch me get thinner. It felt like. And having struggles eating, having a lot of struggles with like headaches and just mental brain fog. All I could do is talk to people and watch TV, and play on my phone. And that was all I was doing. I didn't have desire to really do anything else. I cut off everybody I was talking to, which kind of screwed me because I cut off the receptionist, who I was having the affair with. That I was 36 and she was 19 when we started hooking up, and then I celebrated her birthday with her. She turned 20, and like I was such a POS. And I ignored her. I ignored um, my ex-wife's cousin, who I was having just a ton of sex with. She actually ended up, because of the blow up my wife and I had, she actually was living with us, which was good. She ended up moving out and staying with her boyfriend because she had a boyfriend. She still has the same boyfriend, but she moved in with her boyfriend like full time, which is good because we stopped having sex then, because she was like the go-to. Like she liked to drink, and we would get drunk, and then you get bored and you have sex. So it was like I kind of like forced by myself into like loneliness, which was okay. I was okay. I wasn't really lonely because I was on the phone constantly with like people I knew. Got my new job started up at Family RV, going to meetings, getting my 24-hour tokens, and this was like my big focus. Like all I can remember from back then, my brain fog was really really bad. But like doing my laundry, like getting my house all cleaned up, like it was one of those things like, hey, I'm going to clean up the house, clean up my life type deal. Start getting healthy. Um, I got a new job lined up. This is gonna be me starting over. Like I'm not gonna hit rock bottom all that hard or all that fast. Sunflowersober.com. Download Sunflower Sober, the app, for any of your sobriety needs. This app has an AI sponsor to give you 24-hour support. It has journaling. It has the ability to help you determine what is carving your cravings, what is going on through your head, and actually get you into therapy to understand addiction and even more. Sunflower Sober on iOS is the way to go. And I can do this. So that was how I first started getting sober. I mean, it was made with that decision and that determination. Started going to these meetings, and it's talking to my dad. I start my new job, and I'm sober. And again, I'm like in the first week of sobriety, so I've been there before. I would usually make it 30 days to 60 days, and then I would relapse. Like after 30 days to 60 days, I would get like my 2 tokens or 1 token, and I'd be like, "Fuck this, dude! Like I got it under control." I go back to drinking, and then it would just go back to drugs, and it would just escalate back down because I never had control of it, but I always thought that I did. I'm very very ego driven, and I am at work, and I get a text from Casey, and she's like, "I told your wife everything," and I'm like, "Oh fuck." And dude, that's the one thing I will say getting sober that you can't prepare for. Any skeletons you have in your closet, dude, they are coming out, and they're coming out with a vengeance. I'm week sober at work, and here's this girl texting, and she's like, I sent your wife screenshots of all of our conversations, and I'm just like, oh, fuck. Because of course I'm shit talking my ex-wife, and I'm shit talking how I don't want to be married and all this, and how I want to pound her out, and how she's so much better than my ex-wife and shit like that. Very manipulative person I was. I was such a horrible human being. Like I'm really glad I healed a lot of that because so much of it was not an excuse. None of it's an excuse. I was a shitty person, but it was a lot of how I dealt with my trauma. I would self sabotage. I had to manipulate people. I needed so much validation that people loved me and weren't going to leave me because everyone left me. And if you left me, it was on my terms. And I could yeet you out of my life before you left me, so I was always the victim. And that's why I think that trauma therapy and stuff and therapy in general is so important in getting sober. That was really the final big step in my sobriety. So I'm like shit. And guess who starts blowing me up is my ex-wife. My ex-wife, Amber, at the time, she starts blowing me up. You motherfucker, all this. And I'm lying to her, and she's sending me the screenshots, and I'm telling Casey how good she tasted and all this shit. And that's like, fuck. And I don't know what to do, man. I'm at work. And I'm just pretending everything's okay with a big old smile on my face. Okay, okay, everything's okay. Lying to my salesman, like, shit, dude, I'm gonna go home and fucking war, don't come home. And then all of a sudden I get finally a call from her dad, and it turned out she broke her hand. So I'm like, fuck this, and what do? I'm not a man, and I will always admit this. Like when I got sober, I wasn't a man at all. I was poor me, fine, you're right, I'm a fuck up, I failed. I suck. I'm moving out. We'll get divorced. All this stuff. I went right. I went right there. Like I was really good at accepting it, but I was being a bitch about it. And she ends up punching the wall, and she hit a beam in the wall and shattered her hand, and ends up in the emergency room because she compound fractured her hand. and they have to give her, she has to go to surgery now for this, and she's going to be in the hospital for like a day or two. And I'm like, fuck, dude. I'm like calling up friends at this time already because I was like, I need to find somebody to live with, like somebody I can stay with. I got a hold of a good friend of mine. He's like, yeah, you can come over for like a couple days and stuff. Like, we'll figure this out. I'm like, thank you, bro. Like, I essentially move in with him and his wife and kids. I ended up flipping him, I think, like $500 or something. I was like, thanks so much, because he helped me when I needed it. And I'm talking to my parents and stuff, and because I got to beat my ex-wife to the punch, and I'm of course playing the victim with them. I was really good at manipulating my parents, really, really good. I learned how to do that from a very young age. I have a book coming out, and if you read the book, it tells you how I learned to manipulate my parents, and it was like, God, I don't know where all this shit started, but I'm glad I'm not that person anymore. I if you yeah, you just learn how to like twist things. So I have a place now to kind of stay. She's not home. My father-in-law is there watching the dog, and I get there and like drawn all over like the mirrors and stuff. It's like cheater and all this shit. And I'm like, fuck, all right. And I'm texting her and stuff, and like we're talking all day long, and it's like sending pictures of us crying, very toxic back and forth. I grab a bunch of clothes, put them in my car, and I drive over to his house, and I'm like, I'm fucking out, I'm done, da da da. I don't have any money, so I started this new job, and I got my paycheck when I got fired, and I gave it to my ex-wife to deposit in her account, and she did, and she wouldn't give me any of it, and I was like, you fucking bitch. So I ended up selling my Rolex, and I paid my Rolex off. I sold like $5,000 on it or something like that. And I think I cleared like $6,000 after. So I paid that off real quick, and I had like $6,000 now to my name. Sweet, flip that. So I flipped Carlos, who I was staying with, some money, and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna rebuild my life. I always rebuild my life. I'm like a week sober. I'm going to meetings and shit, like I kind of already didn't expect it to ever get better, because I always had trouble when I went to AA and stuff of everyone telling me how it was going to get better and all this. And it never fucking got better for me, man. I never was with it long enough, but it never got better for me. I always thought everyone was a fucking liar. But I'm like, people just keep coming here and they're all like being normal. So maybe there's some truth in this. So I'm going to meetings, and I'm working at Family RV. And I mean, we're going on just almost 2 weeks sober at this time, and I'm latching on to my sobriety. I mean, even I remember Carlos was like, dude, you having trouble sleeping? He's like, you want like a shot of Fireball and stuff? I'm like, no, I'm sober, dude. I can't. And I was really adamant about it. I was like, but it was like I lived short-term goals. I was like, I was going to be sober for like 6 months, and then this has already set me up for my relapse. So I'm like, dude, I'm in the clear. Like, I'm going to be able to relapse really easy because of all this that's just happened. So I downloaded this game. Like, I was playing games on my phone. Like, that was my escape. So I play my phone games and sit outside and smoke cigarettes and stuff. Man, it sucked. Run in a dealership. So I'm with him, and my ex-wife gets out, and we just kind of start talking, and she finally hit me up. I hadn't seen her for about a week. And she was like, I'm sober. I'm going now to meetings. I don't have a sponsor or anything. I did set up an appointment, though, with my psychiatrist to start, figuring out some right meds to get on, getting back on my Adderall. One of the things is I realized is like I wasn't taking my Adderall at all for my ADHD. Got in with my psychiatrist, got a prescription for Adderall, got that back into my system, and like things became kind of normal. I didn't feel like I had to self-medicate to slow down. And she had called me up, and she was like, I need a favor of yours. I'm like, what? She's like, I haven't taken a bath in like 2 days, and I don't feel comfortable getting naked with anyone. Will you come over and help me? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I felt bad for her. Like, my ex-wife didn't deserve this. We weren't necessarily compatible, but she didn't deserve what I put her through. It was I should have been a bigger man and realized, like, hey, like, let's try and work through some of this other stuff, see if we are compatible or not. I wasn't that, though. That wasn't me. And I go over there, I help her take a bath, and next thing you know, we're making out, and we end up having sex. And, we're trying to talk, and we're like, well, what are we going to do? I've cheated on her. I've had multiple affairs. She only knows of one. She only knows of Casey. And she knows that it was like an ongoing affair. And I lied to her about a lot of stuff. Like, she would ask me, like, did you ever have sex in our bed and stuff? And it was like, yeah, I had sex in our bed with her and with her cousin and a few other people. And but I'd lied. I couldn't tell the truth to save my fucking life. And that's the reality of an addict. You are a lying piece of shit. And I didn't tell her any of the truth. And her and I just kind of started talking. Well, let's see what this is, and she would find out I forgot that she was like tracking my phone. Like we had downloaded one of those. We both had iPhones. She was on my phone plan, and we had it down where we were like sharing locations. And she'd be like, "Where the fuck are you at?" Like it was so toxic, man. Like if I wasn't with her or talking to her, and I was out because like I'd go catch Pokemon. Pokemon Go has been a part of my life since it came out. I used to use it for addiction, and then I even use it a lot in sobriety, and I use it a lot now to get out of the house. But I'd be out with him and she'd be like, "What the fuck," and I'd be on the phone with her like, "What the fuck you mean?" And we're just so toxic. And I'm just like, at least I'm getting sober. Like each day, like a little bit of clarity, and everything was just a distraction. I think that was what was bad too. Is like everything was a distraction, so it was never like really addressing shit that I needed to address. And I understand this a lot. If you go to ericbzink.com, which is my website, I do like a lot of one-on-one mentoring, and I talk to a lot of people that have went through that. Where you're like, first getting sober is easy because you're distracted, but then when the reality kicks in, it kicks in, and that's a lot of what I do, even mentoring on. And I even have a daily planner there. I have different supplements there and stuff to use to get sober. Because like I wish I would have known about a lot of this stuff. If I would have started taking magnesium and stuff like that, it would have helped me so much with my sleep. I start just organizing my day with day planners and stuff. But I muddled through the day, and I downloaded a sobriety app. I Am Sober was the app I downloaded. If you want a sobriety app now, Sober Sunflower is an amazing app. That app is actually badass. Has a 24-hour sponsor and journal and everything, and it's all free. So if you want a really good app now, Sober Sunflower is the way to go. So I'm watching like my sober days ticking up and talking to my dad. I talked to my dad a lot. My dad was like always like kind of my rock when I would get sober. When I'd go through shit, because I could always be like poor me with my dad, and he'd be there for me. And I knew he was struggling a lot with trying to retire. And I'll never forget that week, man. So I'm going on my third week sober, like 2 weeks at my new job. I started my job in like the end of, I got sober 7/25/17, and I think I started my job like the 7:30 or something like that. So when I started my new job, and it's into August and my birthday's slowly kind of creeping up. And I remember the week of the right before the 13th of August. And my ex-wife and I kind of decided like, hey, let's kind of see where this goes. So all of a sudden now on Wednesday nights, I'd go over to our condo and we'd hang out and cook and talk. And then Sunday nights, we decided kind of would be like our nights. I didn't work the next day. I never spent the night over there with her. I'd always go back home. But we started, having sex again, all that. Like, no, not healing our relationship, not doing anything any different. Not coming to terms with a lot of stuff, not going to therapy, any of the stuff that we actually should have did. We're just there, just muddling through it. And I was happy because like my life was all like getting pieced back together. Like this is what always happened to me, man. Like I was sober for like 3 weeks, and I have a sales manager job. I'm going to be back at making six figures, a year. Life is, my ex-wife at the time we weren't divorced or anything. We were separated. My ex-wife wants to get back together with me, and, we're like, all of it's going to work out. It always fucking worked out. And that was like the worst part of it. And I remember just being over at like Carlos's house and being on the phone with my dad, and he was at like had a RC helicopter like thing in Ohio with some friends, and just I knew he was struggling a lot with his upcoming retirement because he didn't want to retire. And I was like, I started just feeling better. Like my life's all good again. Life's all good, dude. Less than 3 weeks, I put my shit back together. But I was like, no, I gotta stay sober. I have made a commitment to myself. I'm gonna stay sober for six months, and then I'm gonna relapse, and it's justifiable. And I'm back on my meds. Like, dude, everything's all right. And I remember it was a Friday. I'm talking to my dad on the phone. I'm on the phone with my mom, and everybody's like laughing because life is good. You know, Eric's getting sober again, got a job, all this. Like, you know, things are falling in line. Like, life is good. Dad's laughing. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to bother you guys at all this weekend. Like, I love you guys. And, you know, I'll call you on Monday. Like, I'll let you have the weekend. Because whenever I struggle, I'd always call my parents like every single day. That was actually part of my getting enabled, you know, and convincing them into enabling me is I would give them tons of attention when I struggled. And very narcissistic, very, very narcissistic. Then I would, you know, I told them I'm not gonna bother harass you guys for at least, you know, until Monday. You know, have a good one. My dad's laughing on the phone. Love you guys. All that good stuff. I hang up with them and work on Saturday. Works good. Just like I'm feeling on top of the world. Talking to Amber, and you know, Sunday we're gonna hang out. Sunday was my meeting day, so Sunday was like a big day for me. This was like my third, you know, meeting that I'm going to on the Sunday. Like I decided that would be my home meeting. I went to some meetings and stuff in different meetings on the weekdays, but just none of them I liked as much as I did this Sunday meeting. And so I went to my early morning Sunday meeting, and I had seen this video where people, you took an onion and you diced it into big rings, like onion rings, raw onion rings, and then you balled up meat and you put like a square of cheese inside the meat. You put it in around the onion ring wrapped around it, and then you breaded it and you fried it, and they were like cheeseburger balls. And I was like, I'm gonna make these. And I was like, I'll cook you dinner for our little date night thing and stuff. And she's like, all right. And I go over there, and you know, we're outside smoking and just kind of talking, and you know, figuring out how are we gonna do this. And I'm gonna end up cooking dinner. You know, had my token, and of course I'm waving it in front of like her face, like, look at me, I'm getting sober. And I get a phone call from my brother, and I ignore it. And it's like 9 at night. I get another call from my brother, and I ignore it. Get another call from my brother, I ignore it. Actually, it was more like, yeah, it was about 9-ish, somewhere around there. I ignore these 3 phone calls, because I'm outside, I'm making out with Amber. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm supposed to be cooking this food because I'm getting hungry. And I do the math in my head. My brother lives in Michigan, and I'm in California. So 9 o'clock my time is like 1 a.m. in Michigan. Or midnight in Michigan, yeah. So something's not right. So I call my brother right back, and I have this weird gut thing all of a sudden. I'm like, I think my dad got in like an accident or something. I don't think my dad's alive anymore. So I call my brother. He gets on the phone. He's like, hey man. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, I was calling to let you know, Dad died. I'm like, oh. Okay, you know, do they know what happened? He goes, they are saying that it looks like he might have taken his life. And man, that just like brought up all sorts of fucked up trauma, man. My ex, she was never my ex-wife. Brandy, my wife, killed herself August 27th, 2015. She killed herself. And here my dad, August 13th, 2017, just killed himself. This Sunday. And I just went numb. Like I didn't cry, I didn't break down. I just kind of went numb. And I'm like, you got to be shitting me, man. You know, do they know how he did it? You know, all this stuff. How's mom? Mom was with the cops and stuff. She couldn't really talk. I was just like, damn. I was like, all right, well, I got to figure out how to get up to Michigan. It was awesome. So I talked to him for a little bit, and I hang up, and I walked back up the stairs, and I looked at Amber, and I'm like, my dad just killed himself. She was like, what? I'm like, yeah. And I went inside and made the cheeseburger balls because I was obsessed with it. I was like, I have to do something. I can't even think about this right now. So I go upstairs, and because our condo's on the second floor, and I make these cheeseburger balls and we eat them. She's like, I'm just in a daze. And I just remember her saying, like, you need to just sleep here tonight. You need to just sleep here tonight. And I'm like, I don't have any of my shit here. Like, fine. I end up getting to bed, and she held me that night, and I end up going to sleep. I wake up the next day, and I have to go to have to go to work. So I go driving into work. I call, the other manager up and stuff, and say, hey, I'm gonna have to bolt out of town. My dad killed himself. Like, I was really blunt with people, and they're like, what the fuck? I'm like, yeah, my dad killed himself. So I get to work. I end up booking tickets for Amber and I to go up to Michigan. We're gonna go up. That was Tuesday. I think we would go up like on a Wednesday finally. And I was just in a daze. And I didn't drink. I didn't relapse. I didn't do any of that. I just kind of held it all together. Didn't know what to think or do. And it sucked, man. Like, I was just really numb. And I just started kind of going through the motions. And I kind of like latched onto anything I had. And I did latch onto my sobriety pretty hard. So I'm like, this is like something I could identify as. Like, this is my sobriety. And it'll be okay. I'm going to just focus on being sober. Like, if I put all my energy and focus into my sobriety, like, this will help me. And it did. It kept me sober, essentially. But it wasn't because, like, I wanted to necessarily be sober. It was like a part I had before my dad. I didn't want to let him down. And it started, like, went up there, saw my family. Amber got to see where I grew up and stuff. Had the viewing for them. They kind of did everything pretty quick, did the viewing and all that. And then it was like, all right, I fly back home. I got to go back for the funeral itself. Start having panic attacks. I ended up getting prescribed Xanax to help me with panic attacks. That was helpful because I didn't want to relapse. Like, I was really big on like not wanting to relapse. And I didn't relapse. This was okay. And it was hard, man. It was like, this is how I fucking got sober. Like, that's why I'm so big on, like, there's no right or wrong way of getting sober. It's your way to get sober. Flew back up to Michigan. We buried my dad, and that's when I started finally working like the 12 steps and stuff. I started going to NA and AA. I started being a little bit more open about my addictions. Started being more open about cocaine addiction. Started being more open with a lot of things. But the things that, like, I didn't do that could have made my sobriety so much easier is like focusing on my relationship with my ex-wife. Instead, we just end up getting back together because my dad killed himself. No therapy, no anything. That marriage eventually, we shouldn't have stayed married. I ended up cheating on her again a lot and didn't want to be married. It was just not a good situation. But I never addressed that. I got back, and I just thought that I had to be strong. And people, I think, were just shocked at what I'd been through. Like, I lost my wife, and I just lost my dad to suicide. And like, I drew a lot of strength off that, but it kind of fed my ego a little bit. And I was like, cool, like, I am strong. Like, look at me. And I felt like indebted to my ex-wife. And so we were living in a condo. She really wanted a house. So we rented a house that was more money than where we were living to get a yard and stuff like that. So we end up, I just constant distractions. It was never like working on getting sober. I ended up started the 12 steps and started working through those. Ended up doing the 12 steps eventually. Then almost started doing the 12 steps again. But I started working those, going to NA and AA, just thinking that I had it all figured out because I was so strong that I didn't relapse during this time. But I was like going off of like pure just like pain and everything. It was almost like I thrived on the pain in its own weird way. And because I didn't heal at all through this sobriety, I never went back to alcohol and I never went back to drugs. But like, my ex-wife and I get back together, and I'm faithful to her to begin with. And the next thing I know, I ended up cheating on her again with her cousin. I'd been sober for like 4 or 5 months, and I didn't really have many friends and stuff at this time because I'm not using, and The dealership that I worked at was a smaller dealership, so there weren't a lot of people per se there. And I remember on one of my days off, like her and I would just go hang out, and she would go drink or whatever. But I was sober, and I talked her into having sex in the back of my truck again. And I remember her walking, like dropping her back off at her boyfriend's, and she's like, I'm dripping out inside. She's like, I'm just laughing to myself, and like I just wanted to be wanted. And I didn't like my marriage. Like I'm not addressing any of the trauma, not addressing my dad's loss, not addressing my ex-wife's loss, not addressing the fact that I shouldn't be married right now. All of this stuff. And I mean, I'm sober, and that's the fucked up thing is like, and I even now default to that. Like, but I was sober. Man, I was not good. There's a difference between being sober, I think, and being good. And I was not good. Good with myself, and good with life, and good with my happiness, any of that. And I got bored. Next thing you know, I built a koi pond in the backyard and trying to distract myself with that. That was in January. I built a koi pond in my backyard. Built a badass koi pond. I want to build one again here sometime. And then I start this whole mental health thing all of a sudden, and it was just because I wanted to like do a side business or something. My roommate who was living with me was a friend of mine, and he was like helping me even with the 12 steps and stuff. And we started this whole business idea, and then he kind of got burnt out with it. I kind of just took it over. I think I kind of like bullied him out of it even too, and just kind of made it my own. And I started doing like this whole mental health thing. Like I think I'm going to start saving the world while I'm trying to save myself, which was so toxic and unhealthy. I started getting attention for it, which I was thriving off of, which was super unhealthy. It was just such a bad gig, bad deal right there. And I ended up like, I got on the news and I flew to Michigan. I flew to Michigan with this girl I had met out in California that I went to school with and graduated with. And we fly up to Michigan, and we end up staying in a hotel for like 3 days, and we just have a fuck fest. But I'm sober. And, I do this whole thing on my dad and his suicide on the news. And I'm trying to do this whole like raising awareness, going to save the world thing. And it was just a potential cycle. And I was sober in California. I was sober for almost 3 years, over 3 years in California. And I hated my life. I ended up getting fired from the job at Family RV. I ended up becoming a rep for an RV manufacturer. Decided I'm not sure what I really wanted to do with my life. I really had struggles with like what I wanted to do with my life. Not healed at all. Going to psychiatrists and stuff like that, on meds. I'd gotten off of benzos pretty easily. Wasn't on them very long. I struggling a lot with depression though. And I just kind of like occupied myself with social media. I started really just diving into social media and thinking this was like my outlet, my way out, all this stuff. And this is awesome. Like this is what I'm gonna do. And next thing you know, I end up I hated life. I hated all of it. And our marriage is just floundering and suffering. And we shouldn't have been married. Then I end up getting to the point where she ends up finding I was cheating on her. And I could have stayed with her, and we could have probably done the same thing again. In fact, I know we could have, but I couldn't. I needed to move on. I knew part of my sobriety and part of what I was going through, I had to change. Because not enough had changed. Like I'm sober, but I'm not good. I ended up moving to Arizona. I get a room to rent in Arizona, and I'm like, I'm going to restart my life here. And when I moved, I did get a lot more clarity. And next thing you know, I have some job offers hit me up. And one of them happened to be in Idaho. And I'm like, screw it, dude. I'll take this sales manager job in Idaho. They pay me an upfront, moving fee or whatever to get me up there. And I'm kind of lonely. I'm by myself, but I have still lots of attention. I even went back through Orange County. Hooked up with this girl that I thought was kind of hot, but she turned out to be kind of a whack job. Even hung out with my ex-wife some when I was there. Even hooked back up with my ex-wife when I was there. Drove up to Idaho, moved up here, and this is all during COVID even. Get settled in here, And having a solid job, having a new place, I got rented a room from one of my service techs at my dealership. So I have cheap rent. I have super cheap rent, and I'm making money, and I'm like balling all of a sudden. So I'm trying to pay stuff off and get stuff handled. Tell my ex-wife, we're getting divorced. She had filed, but she never really went through with anything. So I end up filing for divorce, and we finally get divorced in January of 20, or no, July of 2021. We finally got divorced, and I end up meeting my now wife. But even then, still not good. Like things were a lot better. Like moving really helped. Like really starting over, creating the life that I wanted, learning how to be comfortable by myself because I was single for about a year, and yeah, I hoarded up and slept around and did my thing, and that part was great. But then finally, the last part of it really finally didn't hit until I was um, with my wife. We were coming up on almost a year together, and I just kept self sabotaging myself. I needed a lot of validation, and she ended up catching me just talking to girls. Not I didn't cheat on her, but I was looking for validation from others, and we get in a big blow up, and I went into AA again because I've always would go on and off to meetings. Even when I moved up to Idaho, there was sometimes in Idaho that I was doing like a meeting a night. I was almost going to do 90 days or 90 meetings in 90 days, but I just couldn't do it. I was like, I'll do 30 meetings in 30 days, or 90 meetings in 30 days, or whatever it is. So I finally at that time though finally went back to a 5 years sober, man, asking them I need help. I'm back here. I'm 5 years sober, dude, but my life is still shit and I'm still ruining it. And I got a new sponsor. Told him about kind of what I've been through. It's August when I lost my wife and my dad. And now it's been a while since I lost my wife and my dad. He noticed that I didn't really address it much, and he's like, "Dude, you got a lot of trauma that you haven't addressed." And that's when I found out about trauma therapists and stuff. And I started reaching out to therapists and set like 6 therapy appointments with different therapists. And the first one I went to, her name was Susan. And I didn't like her immediately when I saw her, but she was amazing. And that's when it all started to make sense. And I started going to trauma therapy and learning how to heal my trauma, to talk about my trauma, to understand that, there wasn't anything that I could do, that the trauma will always be there, but how it affects me is going to be different. And that was a lot of growth for me. That was like the big key. And there's a lot of things I still struggle with. There really is. There's a lot of things I still struggle with, but nothing like I used to. And nothing trauma-wise like I used to. And that's the thing that I love, is that I really learned to come to terms with so much. I learned to love myself better. And the more that I could love myself and love my past and love who I was, the more I could love my wife. I learned to be more honest and open with her. I realized how strong of an individual she was. And I realized also how much she loved me. And I think that was really big. And my trauma therapist said it is, why it hurt me so much with my wife when we had our little blow up was she was the first person in a long time that saw and heard me. And I needed to be seen and heard, and not many people had. And that hit me different. And I even remember telling my wife that. And that made a huge, huge difference. And it made a difference talking to someone about the therapy and stuff you were going through, and to finally break down and go, man, this is what I'm struggling with. And we have our ups and downs. We have our good times and bad times still. I mean, but we've made it through so much. And like, I adore my wife now. And I'm really proud of the husband that I became. And I'm proud of what I've achieved because of her strength. And I'm proud of her of what she's achieved. Like, growing together with somebody and not competing with somebody is amazing. And that was a huge part. Like, I was ready for a relationship again. I was single I had a goal to be single for a year. And that really was a huge thing. Like, that made a difference. I learned how to have fun by myself. I learned how to occupy my time. I learned how to go on my own adventures. I learned how to live my life by my terms, so that I could love myself enough that when I got into a relationship, I could love someone else. And again, being sober this time. And I mean, I love it that I never have ever went back to cocaine and never burned my life to the ground again. Because there's been so many times that it was so close where, like, I'm teetering, like, should I not type deal, even like talking to myself. And I will say this, that the first 5 years of getting sober sucked. The worst 5 years ever, man. It was good, but it was bad. Like, it was cool to see the growth, but it sucked. It sucked a lot. But the last 2 years have been really amazing. And who knows what this next year holds. TikToks might go away. I'm really hoping that TikTok doesn't, because I do social media for full time. And TikTok is a part of my social media that I do full time, and it helps pay the bills. So I'm nervous and anxious about that. And, there's always stressors and stuff, but how you handle it's differently. But I've had, like, I'm very grateful for the last 2 years of my life, and what I've been through with my wife, and the growth that we had of, going from this little condo to being poor, trying to DoorDash, building her business, to living in a beautiful house, to buying a house, to being in escrow right now that we're supposed to close on our house in like 15 days. 15 days we're supposed to be homeowners, which is kind of crazy to me and kind of exciting. And then it's like, okay, cool, well, we got that. And then, a lot of the unknown, but like, it's been a hell of a ride. These last 2 years have meant everything to me. And that's how I got sober. That's my sobriety story. And I think, like, your sobriety story doesn't ever have an end. And I think that's the thing that sometimes people struggle with, is like, if I do this, this, and this, it's done and I'm good. And I don't think it works out that way. I don't think your sobriety is that way. I think your sobriety is constant journey, constant healing, constant working, constant growth, and constantly becoming who you want to become. And I think that's a big part of what the sobriety truly is. And our sobriety, I think, for everybody's different. That's why, when you tell people, like, hey, I got sober because I didn't want to get sober. I got sober out of the whole fact of relapsing, that I could be a victim. I think there's a lot more stories out there like mine of how people got sober, but I don't think that we share enough, because it's like, you're supposed to fit this cookie cutter mold, and you don't know how to fit the cookie cutter mold. And if you don't fit the cookie cutter mold, like, you don't know what to do. I struggle even now, like, going to AA and stuff, and I see these people who are like, 60 days sober. They're like, my God, I'm 60 days sober. My life is amazing. I'm like, dude, I fucking hated my life. I hated my life for 2 years, motherfucker. How is your life amazing all of a sudden after like 60 days? Like, go fuck yourself. I mean, that is my mentality with it. And I think it's okay to have that mentality. I think it's okay to be a little bit bitter. We're bitter at ourselves. We're angry at ourselves. And we just don't know how to heal that. And it's a process. And that's why I think the more that you share the real and the reality of getting sober and the how to get sober, the more that it helps people out there. The more that it helps people out there fight to get sober, the more that it helps people out there get sober. And that's what it's all about. Getting sober, man, is different for everyone. And hopefully this helps someone. I mean, I really do. I'm going to be doing some podcasts here in California. I'm at a recovery center here. And I'm looking forward to, like, talking to some doctors and talking to others in this. And now having the chance to interview others. Actually, one of the big interviews, the first interview I'm going to do with the Riverside app is going to be my wife. I'm looking forward to this. I already know what we're going to talk about. It should be an interesting conversation. My wife and I already do a podcast on a whole different thing. So to do another podcast with her episode will be pretty easy. Plus, she's a lot of fun to talk to, and we get fired up. But I'm also looking forward to talking to, people in the field, or people in that work in sobriety, sharing about it. Because looking back at it, like, I kind of wish I would have did rehab. I wish I would have went to a rehab. It would have been nice to kind of get away from everything, but I didn't have insurance at the time. I was, like, in between jobs. Even when I worked at Family RV, I never had insurance. I had to, like, get my own private insurance. And so it's just kind of nice to, like, I wish I would have. Looking back, I really wish I would have, like, gotten into a sober living, sobriety center. I think it would have made a big difference, just being around other sober people and seeing other people's life shit, and knowing that I'm not living a lie per se, because for a while I thought I was living a lie. But it comes down to you don't know until you actually hear somebody's story. So I appreciate you guys, man. If you haven't hit the follow button on this podcast, make sure you hit it. Make sure you leave some reviews for me too. I appreciate it. I'm up to 2 5-star reviews on iTunes podcast, whatever that is, and Spotify. So I do appreciate whoever left the reviews. Like, that's awesome. I'm glad to see I'm at 5 stars with 2 reviews. That's kind of cool. You can hit me up on ericbzink.com. If you go there and you fill out the submission form and you want to do a podcast with me, let me know. Probably going to start reaching out in some podcast groups and even some addiction groups because I'm really bent on like sharing other people's stories. If you haven't been to my website, ericbzink.com, I have everything there. I have all my socials there, all that stuff. The more that I share, the more that I keep doing stuff. I love sharing it all with everybody and in any ways that I can because I mean it's a fight, and my biggest thing is always, and I think that's where my passion grew from, is like I never wanted anyone to ever feel alone. So if I can help people feel less alone, it makes me feel good, and it makes me happy, and it brings me happiness. And if it brings me happiness and brings other people happiness, then hey, why not? So until the next episode, guys, you enjoy, and I love y'all.